Buenos días. ¿Cómo están recuperados de la fiesta? ¿Cómo fue la fiesta?
Más o menos.
¿Qué horas acabó la fiesta? Tarde.
Levanten la mano los que terminaron a la 1 de la mañana.
What time did the party end? How are you feeling after the party? Who ended at 1 a.m., at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m.? I know that someone stayed until 4 a.m., 3:30 a.m. myself.
Muy bien. Entonces, acá estamos para el último día de nuestro evento. Muchas emociones, muchas risas, muchas lágrimas, mucha cosa buena, mucho aprendizaje.
So there's a lot of learning, you know? Yes, I'm feeling really good. I'm happy that these 4 full days of sharing with each one of you and to have these strong voices from the Amazon region with us boosting this action. So I'm really happy. Okay, so let's get started with some housekeeping. So let's go. The buses will leave at 3 p.m. and tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have at 8, 12, and 2 p.m. so that you do not miss your flights. You have to be ready with all your luggage. But I really don't want to leave. I want to stay here. Yeah, just to let you know, the bus is going to leave from the Juan Montalvo Park, not in the Palomina Park where we have met, but it's a few blocks up. Yeah. So, and they are going to Quito. Those who are watching us on YouTube, we are going to get started with a very special activity. And Marcela, please step forward with us.
Querida Amazonía, bajo la luna llena en Libra,
Dear Amazonia, under this big moon, my heart that yearns for the ecosystems to be honored. Many Amazonic ethnic groups, they have not been able to touch, and not even in their vocabulary, they have a term of word to call it. Among the old creation, away from a glacier, there was an inhabitant. A sacred territory with full of biodiversity. What is the connection of the Amazonian and the glacier? The divine water that invites us to dialogue. How to be able to talk with something that you cannot call. Perhaps it's now the time of the ice to be remembered. By calling it by its name, we bring from far away everything that we need for its white blanket to safeguard. Together, these white mountains and these green forests help us to understand how to melt it. 7 years ago, I didn't know what was a glacier, and the tropical glaciers changed my life. 3% of the water that we have in the planet, the fresh water, less than 3% of the fresh water that we have in the planet, 70% of it is in the glaciers. Our body is 70% water. We are walking glaciers. The glaciers are the cathedrals of the planet. These are the library of humanity. It's the files of Mother Nature. It's their temples, and that's where our gods have decided to dwell. So the ignorance of not knowing that my country, Colombia, had tropical glaciers had led me to create a movement that wants to honor, support, and learn lessons before it's too late. Together, we can take actions for our glaciers and remember that everything is connected. So now I want to invite you all to set your hands in front of you and accompany me in this mantra that the summit is not the highest point of the mountain. It is not the goal for a human celebration just to conquer the summit, but our heart, which is the most important summit. For our glaciers, please repeat after me. Other hand. We remain united. Let it be. Thank you, Amazonia, for connecting the Andes with the tropical glaciers.
Ese fue un poema hermoso de Marcela Fernández. Muchísimas
That
gracias.
was a beautiful poem from Marcela Fernandez. Thank you so much, Marcela, for this inspiring message this morning. Now, we are going to start with our first speaker of the last block. Luis Arteaga is a biologist with over 25 years of experience. He was the scientific coordinator of the biological station Tunkini and in the ministry. He is currently director of conservation of the Amazonian conservation, where he boosts the sustainable livelihoods, including the Amazonian Fruit and Climate Change Observatory in Bolivia. Welcome, Luis.
Quiero compartir principalmente con aquellas personas
I would like to share
instituciones, iniciativas locales, algunas lecciones aprendidas de
those
cómo
people
elaborar
who will
propuestas
learn of how to prepare proposals for the management of the territory, for the forest comprehensive management and biodiversity. 25 years ago, I was a biologist who really loved doing some research in the field, especially the interactions of plants and animals. I was able to work for so many years in the Amazonian forest of Bolivia in the very similar topography as Baños. 12 years ago, there was a great opportunity to be able to relate to a new institution. It was a local institution, which is Conservación Amazonia. At the beginning, I was doubtful because this was an institution that was just getting started. But when I saw its vision, especially the area that was determined to work, which included the Amazonian forest of the northern Bolivia, then I took a leap of faith that that's 10 years that I've been working in these institutions already. My job is to write proposals with a wonderful team. We have put together over 100 proposals, and that's where I've been a biologist, and now I am first a biologist in the field to be a desktop biologist. We work also on the management of financing, and there's always a question when we do this: how much money do we have for conservation projects and sustainable development? According to the report of the World Bank, the last 10 years, the international cooperation has funded at least $9 trillion for $9 billion as from different sources, including private foundations, philanthropy, and important funds coming from bilateral and multilateral cooperation. We, from the local institution, have been very lucky and the possibility to relate to many of these funds by starting with the funding from private foundations and philanthropy, and then we manage the resources coming from bilateral and multilateral cooperation. That's how we have become from being 4 people at the beginning to become more than 60 people currently, with people in the field working on site. I do handle one project at the beginning, and now we handle like 30 projects per year. As from this experience and this journey in institutions, that I would like to share some suggestions and some lessons learned, mainly for those initiatives that are working in the resource management. A very important lesson learned is to understand that the financer wants impacts, changes, not to support very specific actions or specific activities. What are these changes? This is changes that will create impact. It should not be in conservation or income because of bioeconomy or impact on culture. We have had the opportunity to support an indigenous territory in Bolivia, the Tacana dos territory, for 10 years. until getting their title deeds. That is an impact that we have created. Another lesson learned is to understand very well the problem that we want to tackle. You, better than anyone, understand what are the main pressures on your territories, but also what are the opportunities out there. When you prepare a proposal, you always have to identify the very specific problems. For instance, we work with the value of the forest resources. At some point, we thought that one of the bottlenecks that we had was the lack of markets for new products. We have learned in this past time that there's a great interest in markets waiting for these products to come there, and that the bottlenecks instead had to deal with the logistics on how to link or relate to these markets or local governance or local capabilities and administrative capacities in the local communities. One of the great lessons that maybe has an before and after when preparing a proposal has to deal with the understanding that the financer has their own goals and results that are already identified by them. So it is not about convincing the financer to please support your idea. It is instead to show or prove the financer that you are a partner, a key partner, to help him meet his goals as well. And finally, a key lesson is trust. Trust is gained throughout the time thanks to the results met. A very clear example is the Amazon region, not just to the results that we have had in the previous versions that we are here in Baños, and surely thanks to today's results, there is going to be other versions ahead. Therefore, with the proposals, what we need to do is to boost the processes in the mid and long terms. A local institution, a local initiative is like a tree in the Amazon region. It is the germination or the start with a seed where you have to water it, see it grow until it becomes a very deep bush with fruits. These fruits don't have to deal with how many projects or money you are managing. Instead, it has to deal with the impacts that we are creating. That's why I would like to share with you an initiative that we implemented in northern Bolivia that brings together several of these lessons learned. This is an initiative and with the support of the IDB and Switzerland. And this is the context in the Amazon region in Pando department. This department has a surface of 6 million hectares. 92% of this surface is covered by Amazonian forests in really good conditions of conservation. And this is because the economy, the local economy is based in seizing the resources of the forest, mainly the castaña, what we call as the Amazonian nut. In this region, we have every year people coming and extract this castaña. We extract over 70,000 tons of fruits of the forest. So we can create an economy that has been working for decades. However, there are a few problems. One of the problems is the little equity in the distribution of the earnings. And another risk is the dependency on the economy on just one product. This risk increases with the dynamics of international markets, and especially with climate change issues. Therefore, the project tries to tackle this problem and to work on the diversification of this leverage with another resources of the forest. We work as from two components. One is at department level with public policies at department level, and another component at local level by boosting and working with role model experiences that can be replicated in the territory progress. One of them is the strengthening of a department platform of Amazonian fruits in the region, where there are more than 40 representatives of productive institutions locally, subnational institutions, and civil society. In this space, we make decisions and they have designed strategies for the value chain of the resources in the woods. Another progress at department level is the Observatory of Amazonian Fruits. I would like to invite you to visit this platform where you will find over 1,500 documents to the fruits of the forest, in addition to information about productive associations, prices, so that the local actor can have this information at hand. And also cartography matters like the maps of the potential production for these species. Locally, we have advanced very well in terms of diversification based on other resources of the forest. Now, many communities are not just leveraging the chestnut or castaña, and this is with real palms and other species. Currently, there are over 700 collectors that implement best practices for agriculture and safe agriculture. Why safe harvest? Because they have to increase 25 meters the palms to get the fruits. These fruits are transferred to some community factories. These factories have been managed by the communities themselves, where over 60% of the people who operate these factories are composed of women. But women have not only found a niche in the operational piece or aspect. There are very important leaders in the region, like Livia Chavez, who is a female leader of the Villa Florida community in the reserve of Manuripi. She commands one of the main associations who work with the leveraging of these new resources. And she has managed that in 5 years, the production from 2 tons of pulp of acai to 60 tons of pulp of acai, of course, creating so many benefits for the community. This is a clear example of an initiative that has been a result of previous impacts, and we are sure that it's going to become an input for future startups. Therefore, this is not just about how much money do we have, but instead, it's about having a clear vision of what we want to do and what are the priorities. That vision to bring the proposals and make these proposals a reality by creating impacts for conservation of the Amazonian forest, but mainly the impacts for the population living in it. Thank you very much.
Muy bien, Luis, muchas gracias. Con los aprendizajes muy importantes para todos nosotros que buscamos proyectos todo el tiempo.
Thank you so much. This is important for those who are seeking projects all the time. Now we would like to invite anthropologists and primatologists. She is Afro-Caribbean abolitionist for more than 15 years. She has researched wildlife with Black and Indigenous communities. In the movement, since 2015, she has helped strengthen the global movement in defense of the colonial science. She was recognized by one of the 50 fixers for promoting equity in science. Her work is her most recent work integrates primate bioacoustics, ancestral archives, and Black and indigenous cosmologies in the Caribbean and Guyana. This is Cynthia Malone.
Back in those days, she could creaturely disguise, rise into clouds, fall into weeds and dirt and sea, the snail as giant, not so slow after all, and becoming like kin, the orangutan swinging
limb by limb, tree to tree, until they killed my dream, had me mistaking my human form, fighting for recognition of an ephemeral skin. I began accepting the shape given, its limits, could not breathe self without resuscitation. Can you see me now? Made invisible, I sought to be archived by their technologies. Made legible, I could no longer shapeshift, change from a center that is sovereign. And from here, hollowed, I cried, with what will I fill myself? I put my ear to the opening of a shell, holding space for movement of air along the ridge of each spiral. Awakened in remembrance of water and how it smoothed me, dissolving inside and out. And now together, let us reimagine the wild. Since I was a young girl, I had memories of monkeys, apes, and tropical forests. Surviving the violences of Brooklyn and Little Guyana, Queens, New York in the 90s, I felt a deep estrangement from what felt like my real home. I would line up my stuffed animals and give speeches about the necessity of conserving our primate relatives. My imagination, these memories of primates, felt like a portal into who I really was before all of this destruction took hold. I was really determined to become a scientist, and eventually I made it to Borneo orangutan to study how they build their nests. Orangutans, like us, are weavers. They spend up to 30 minutes every night building a new nest, selecting particular tree species, creating pillows and blankets to facilitate their comfort. They're incredibly brilliant. I learned so much from the indigenous Indonesian scientists who I worked with at the time. They were able to find nests very quickly and even determine the age of the nest from very far distances. I began to see how much of my learning was deeply influenced by indigenous knowledge versus all the things that I had to memorize in textbooks. This was further deepened this learning in my master's research. I traced the expansion of oil palm plantations from Indonesia and Malaysia, where they were running out of space, back to West and Central Africa, where oil palm is actually native. In this space, I was set to study human-wildlife conflict around oil palm plantations, but my experiences there with these communities who lived at the edge of a protected area at the border with Nigeria really began to open my eyes to some of the histories of conservation that have facilitated colonialism. I was working with one community who was forcibly removed by an international conservation organization from their ancestral homelands in order to create this protected area that you see the entrance of here, Korup National Park. They were placed into a corridor that elephants frequently used, and in this space, we're coming into conflict. I began to see how what we might describe as conflict between humans and wildlife ultimately comes from a disruption of a relationship. For how could we have so much incredible megafauna on the continent of Africa if it wasn't for African peoples that have stewarded them through their own knowledge and technologies? At the same time, this was 2014, when I returned to New York, we were witnessing a rise in the deaths of Black people by the hands of police. Eric Garner, a man from Staten Island, was selling cigarettes on a corner and was murdered as he shouted, "I can't breathe," by a police officer, Daniel Pantaleo. In the aftermath of this murder and the non-indictment of the police officer that murdered him, many of us on Columbia University's campus started to rise up and organize. I became very active in an organization called Black Youth Project 100, leading demonstrations and working through political education. I was learning a lot about some of the synergies between the ways that race was created through the natural sciences initially, and what we were witnessing unfolding in our country and around the world in terms of violence against Black and Indigenous peoples. One of the figures in this history who really stood out to me in this knowing was Ota Benga. Ota Benga was kidnapped from the Ituri forest in Central Africa and taken to various parts of the United States and put on display, including in 1906 at the Bronx Zoo, where he was put in a cage alongside an orangutan as demonstration of being the missing link between humans and animals. Some folks have said that the folks who went to witness Ota Benga were the same folks who went to lynchings. Eugenics is the idea that there is the possibility of good stock amongst us as human beings, that some human beings are closer to intelligence and worth than others. This is not something that was, on the fringes of society. In 1921, there was an international eugenics conference, the second of which was held at the American Museum of Natural History. This coincides very much with some of the constructions of how we think of the wild as being this untamed, uncultivated space where savages live, and this continuum between good stock and wild. This is an early depiction from some eugenicists, Josiah Clark Knott and George Glidden, depicting the geographical distribution of monkeys alongside some inferior types of men. This was 1857, 2 years before The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin was published. So you can see this continuum here. Frantz Fanon, the Martinican revolutionary psychologist, wrote that these were, emblematic of colonial societies. He said, "The terms the settler uses when he mentions the native are zoological terms. He speaks of the yellow man's reptilian motions, the stink of the native quarter, breeding swarms of foulness, these hordes of vital statistics, these historical masses, those faces bereft of all humanity. The laziness stretched out in the sun, that vegetative rhythm of life, all of this forms part of the colonial vocabulary." Ultimately, eugenics is a racist mythology that seeks to corrupt our sense of who we are as beings in relationship with the earth and each other. And it's still alive today. Recently, just a few weeks ago, the first and youngest Black professor at the University of Cambridge, Dr. Jason Arde, was essentially killed in a media attack that was led by an active eugenicist. This is something that I and others have rose up to contest. This is a protest that I co-organized at the Natural History Museum alongside Indigenous peoples that have been fighting for decades for removal of racist exhibits, the return of human remains, and for recognition of some of these historical atrocities. So all of this, and at the end of the day, how do we come to reimagine our relationships to the wild beyond some of these constructions? This is what took me to return to my ancestral homelands of Guyana, also known as the Land of Many Waters, and this project, Decolonizing the Wild in the Land of Many Waters. Here's Guyana, located in South America. I feel like sometimes Guyana is like the middle child of South America, as we are culturally very Caribbean in terms of the coast, consisting of Afro descendants of transatlantic slavery Indo-Guyanese folks who would come over through indentured servitude, and at least nine indigenous tribes stretching from the interior to the coast. My work took me to some plantations where my ancestors would have been enslaved on the coast. And I had these incredible experiences where I was interviewing, documenting some of the archival knowledge of these places, while at the same time hearing howler monkeys in the background. And I remember working with one woman who lived at the edge of this particular estate, and she was saying that whenever she heard the howler monkeys calling, it felt like family. They reminded her of her home. They helped to create her home. And I thought of all the ways that we're already reimagining the wild. So these trenches, like the one pictured there, were actually dug up by enslaved Africans by hand and shovel. And Walter Rodney, Guyanese historian and revolutionary, spoke about how this contributed to the humanization of the coast, because ultimately, we might forget, but this part of Guyana is part of the Amazon rainforest as well. But the amount of transformation of plantation agriculture has completely transformed that landscape to the point where within 5 to 10 years, the capital of Georgetown is projected to be underwater, with all of this incredible ecological knowledge that really needs to be archived. So I've been in this process of work. Here's a creek, Kanji Creek, where my granny would have been raised. This incredible landscape. I've also been working in the interior of Guyana. So this is the Escobo River. And this is where, because of the howler monkey distribution, I'd been able to really take the time to study their vocalization patterns alongside the Makushi in the Iroquois rainforest, which is a Makushi word for a place of refuge. So I want to play for you, a piece that I had made in kind of making sense of all of these ideas called Resounding Ancestor. And it speaks to a reclamation of our primate kin beyond some of these constructions. Can you remember? Before human, before race, to conquer the black everlasting, we shout and sing free, through soul, revolving, through forest, resounding, ancestor, ancestor, ancestor. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Cynthia, por ese mensaje tan poderoso sobre cómo.
Thank you, Cynthia, very much about how we need to change the social constructs within our territories for equity. I want to introduce you to our next speaker. She is an Afro-Colombian woman with nearly 3 decades of work with Afro-descendant and indigenous communities in the Amazon and the Pacific. She is Director of Social Inclusion in Conservation at Conservation International and co-author of a nature portfolio study on the Afro-descendant contribution to biodiversity conservation. She is a member of the science panel for the Amazon. It's a great honor to have you with us. Let's welcome Marta Rosero Peña.
Quiero invitarlos a hacerse
I want to invite you to ask yourselves this question. When you hear the word Amazon, what faces do you see? Who do you imagine living there? I have asked this question many times. I've asked scientists, donors, public officials, and almost no one tells me they see a black face. No one sees a person like me. I am Colombian. I am Afro-descendant. And my personal story is deeply rooted in the history of Afro-descendant peoples in the Americas, a story that had not been told. There are more than 43 million people inhabiting the Amazon. And although there is no official figure, Black peoples are there. In Suriname, there are 6 African tribal systems in the Americas. In Guyana, in French Guyana, in Yungas, in Brazil, in Bolivia, in the Quilombola territories in Brazil, in several areas of the Colombian Amazon. Just as indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants have protected the territories they have inhabited for centuries here in the Americas. Today, we know that there, where Afro-descendant communities are, forests and biodiversity are better conserved than in many regions of the Amazon. And this is not a coincidence. It is the result of managing that Afro-descendant peoples have given nature for almost 500 years of being in the Americas. And today, I want to tell you how we started understanding this, not in a laboratory. Personally, I began understanding this from the memory of my grandparents. Ever since I was a little girl, I have been obsessed with the origin of things, the origins of my family, the origins of food, of seeds, the origins of the people of my region, of my own identity. By listening to my elders, I began weaving stories and drawing from their memories. I was able to reach the last enslaved woman, remember from my family in each branch of it. And that's how I realized that my last name comes from a palenque of the 19th century in a region called Monte Oscuro, a hidden territory within the southwestern forests of Colombia, which is now called the north of the Cauca department. My great-great-grandfather Ignacio got there, a mestizo from the south, and found my great-great-grandmother, Juliana, who was seeking her freedom. That region is a region that Maroons came to, and they were enslaved people who ran away from different towns, villages, territories, and plantation haciendas, and they took refuge within this forest, fleeing their captors. So, for generations, these Maroons descendants found in this forest and live in this forest, and this was their space of freedom and resilience. Then, when they were able to get their freedom, they grew cacao. This cacao was exported, And people from different parts of the world got to this region, attracted by its economy, the economy of cacao, which had been sustained by the hands of people who had once been slaves. Well, Monte Oscuro is now is not a forest, it's not a monte or dark, it's not a dark mountain anymore. There is no cacao or forest. Instead of this, there are villages without basic services, with people who are involved in violence and unemployment, and youth people who are excluded. And now, with no water, no forest, no land, Afro-descendants lost their autonomous opportunity for development. And this loss took me to think, to reflect on what Montesquieu had taught me. And this is the fact that preserving is not only about taking care of trees. Conserving is taking care of freedom, identity, and prosperity. And that was the first notion of conservation that I learned. And I didn't get this from university. I learned it from the Maroons who passed my last name down to me. People who one day found in the forest not only refuge and shelter, but purpose. And I thought this story of my family and Montescuro was just a memory. But no, this is a documented story. And this way of inhabiting the forest, of getting related to nature, is now protecting many key ecosystems for the Amazon. Did you know that in lands legally recognized for Afro-descendant peoples in 4 countries in the world, Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, and Suriname, deforestation can be up to 55% lower than in neighboring areas, and that these lands recognize more than 50% of these lands fall within the top 5% of the planet's most biodiverse areas. And there is a part of this land here in Ecuador. Also, almost half of the threatened vertebrates in this country find refuge in Afro-descendant territories. And finally, 486 million metric tons of carbon are stored in these territories. If this carbon was lost today, it could not be recovered within the time that we have left to confront the climate crisis. These figures I'm showing you come from a pioneering scientific study published in the Nature Journal, and together with the Smithsonian, Conservation International, and several universities in the United States, we have been able to compare Afro-descendant territories that I'm talking about, recognizing these 4 countries with their neighboring areas under the same or similar conditions: same type of forest, same type of water, same human pressure, and the results were consistent across all 4 countries. Furthermore, the statistics study helps us see that these results were the product of the way in which Afro-descendant peoples manage their territories, the ones that they have inhabited for so many centuries. Studies such as these can actually lead us to know how this territory looks nowadays, but within the study, we didn't have the answer to a question that emerged. And it is good because it's like after 500 years of living in the Americas, why do these Afro-descendant territories show such significant environmental outcomes nowadays? And why is not something that can be answered in any other way but through history. So in this historical analysis, I would like to tell you a little bit about this analysis. Even though Afro-descendant peoples didn't get to the Americas by choice, we didn't come with our hands empty either. There's a generalized notion in society saying that the contribution of Afro-descendant peoples to the Americas has been enslaved labor. And this was just a tiny little part of history. Now, let me give you a new perspective. Researchers from many countries of the global north and others from the global south, as in the US, Dr. Judith Carmen, have documented the African legacy in the Americas. And the first thing they say, they talk about the great knowledge that Africans have about the African tropical area. The second point they start talking about is the legacy of domestic animals and the botanic legacy, which is huge from the African tropics to the American tropics. The African and Asian biodiversity that was domesticated 15,000 years before was adapted, cultivated, and multiplied here in the Americas. This helped, and it was multiplied by African people who reached the Americas. This biodiversity helped the adaptation of Europeans because Europe has no tropics. It helped the industrialization of many of the things that we base our economy and our food on, species such as banana, plantain, sugar cane, melon, coffee. They come from Africa, and with them, domestic animals that were not in the Americas came: sheep, pigs, cows, and goats. With them, a huge diversity of knowledge came in, and this knowledge traveled and crossed the Atlantic silently. Knowledge, African knowledge, spoke with local knowledge here in the Americas, indigenous knowledge, and together they strengthened a way of inhabiting and being related to nature. The African legacy of the Americas can be found from the fields in the south of the US, the rice fields, all the way to the quilombola orchards in Brazil, agrodiverse systems in Colombia, and food forest. Sorry. Again. Well, the African legacy to the Americas can be seen in the U.S. South rice field to the Quilombola orchards in Brazil, from the agrobiodiverse systems in Colombia to the food forests in Suriname. Afro-descendants have inherited a practice of Africa called food forest. Food forest is keeping the forest standing while well-being is produced. Together with the knowledge, this dialogue with the indigenous knowledge, a new perspective was created, which is living within the ecosystem and not on the ecosystem. So this is a story that has not been told, or it hasn't been told enough. In the Akan, the Ghana people, there is an ancestral symbol called Sankofa. It is a bird that flies forward while turning its head backwards and carrying an egg in its beak. Sankofa means go back and retrieve it. The egg is our legacy and the lessons of the past. That's why Monte Oscuro also taught me that memory and history is not in only the past. It is direction. And that's why I tell you this story. So then what do we do with all of this? Because this is not only science, it is not only history. The territories of Afro-descendant peoples are endangered. And they are not endangered because they will be forgotten, but they are physically threatened. So today, I am going to have two concrete calls to action. First, to conservation, international cooperation, and Amazonian countries' governments. Integrate Afro-descendant communities as partners in financing, monitoring, decision-making on these territories, and guarantee the essentials: land titling, protection, and territorial recognition. Open up opportunities for them. And to every person in this room, I want to invite you so that every single time you hear to the word Amazon, and after listening to these Afro-descendant people, ask yourselves what other faces are absent in the efforts for saving the Amazon, because we cannot save something we cannot see. So there are peoples that are there every single day. They are there with the knowledge, with their presence, and they help the planet to continue breathing. I am a researcher, but I am also a descendant of women who once were enslaved, who took refuge in forests. And what gives me the most hope is that we're not starting from scratch, because you cannot build the future if you leave your legacy behind. So in 5 countries of the Amazon, together with Afro-descendant organizations, NGOs, and universities, we have all gotten together so that new generations keep the legacy of the forest standing alive for their future. So, as Sankofa, we can still turn our heads. We can still retrieve the egg, but we need to do it now. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Marta, por esta charla poderosa.
Thank you, Marta, for this powerful talk. Marta came by indication of one of our known people. We thought there weren't many Afro-descendant people in the forest, and now we have this amazing talk. Now we are going to bring a Quechua prominent professional and intellectual person from the Ecuadorian Amazon, recognized as one of the most influential voices in the defense of indigenous rights and the rights of nature, with extensive experience in Ecuador's political and institutional life. As a minister of and constituent assembly member, she advanced the recognition of the country as a plurinational intercultural state, as well as the incorporation of Summa Causai, the good living, as a guiding principle. She also promoted the inclusion in the Constitution of the human rights to water and the rights of indigenous.
Los pueblos indígenas amazónicos
In the Amazonian indigenous peoples are as YouTube, a plant that grows at the edge of the Amazon rivers. It withstands storms and the rivers growing, and with its deep roots, it holds the land together. It's a medicinal plant, and if it breaks, it grows back. The rights that indigenous peoples have now are fruit of collective unity, of resistance, and of the strength of unity as a historical phrase that has guided us. Shu Maquilla, Shuyuyaya, Shukshunguya. One single thinking, one single fist, and one single heart. And this is exactly the guiding principle in our path. And what Yutsu gives us is what the indigenous people have told the world: rebuild harmonic coexistence with the earth based on connection and respect, always thinking of present and future generations. We have also asked for our millenary presence to be acknowledged in this planet, our spirituality, our institutions and living systems, our territories with which we have a connection and an intrinsical, interdependent relationship. Our proposal to humanity comes from this connection to the cosmos, and of course, from the teachings of our elders and ancestors who have transferred their knowledge, strengths, principles, and the different ways of governance that we have throughout the different territories. And this is something we have kept since times we cannot remember. The Amazon now represents the greatest freshwater reserve in the planet, the water that goes as veins throughout our territories, discharging in the seas and oceans. But water doesn't only go downstream, it goes upstream as well. The jungle frees millions of tons of vapor into the atmosphere, known as flying rivers. Vapor goes and travels the skies and it reaches the Andes, and in the Andes, these become glaciers, and these glaciers come down as rivers all the way to the Amazon, but they are charged with sediment and debris that always feed the basin. What does this mean? It means that the Amazon and the Andes are interconnected, interdependent worlds, as well as every single ecosystem in the world. But this balance is not out of choice, out of nowhere. If without rivers, the Andean forest, the mangroves are alive. It's because of them that they are alive. And if cities consume water still, it's because there are organized peoples and communities, and it is these peoples and communities the ones that are taking care in managing these ecosystems. Scientific studies show this. Amazonian territories are one of the greatest barriers against deforestation. And we believe that the life of the country depends on this relationship. And that is why the struggle is not for us by us. We are fighting for the planet. What has our path been? Our organizational process have been weaved through centuries, and throughout this path, women have been in front as well. Ecuador, during the 80s and 90s, reached several historical milestones. We got organized, we raced together, and the state, for the very first time, had to acknowledge indigenous peoples as political subjects and as subjects of rights. And this path led us to 2008, where a constitutive assembly took place in the country, and there I was the only indigenous Amazonian woman elected as assembly member.
In that space, and as a member of the indigenous movement in this country, in coordination with other social sectors, with conviction, with bravery, but also with dignity, I was able to defend and advocate each one of the rights and the historical narratives of our peoples. For the first time, we were able to incorporate in the Constitution the plurinational and intercultural character of the state. We were able to incorporate the summa causae, the life in harmony, as a governing principle, like the right to water. We also incorporated the rights of nature that we are talking about today. We also incorporated the equitable participation of indigenous women in the application of the indigenous justice systems that, by the way, both the rights of nature and the equitable participation of women in the indigenous legal system were recognized and pioneered for the first time in the world. I also had the opportunity and the great challenge of presiding one of the most polemic tables or working groups of the Assembly, the working group of natural resources and biodiversity. It was not easy. I had to educate and explain to all Assembly people and even the President of the Republic what actually meant our proposals, what meant plurinational, what meant interculturality. But in addition to that, I also had to face the mass media and to defend against adversaries and certain professors and researchers that opposed profoundly to our proposals. They said that plurinational was going to divide the country. Plurinationality does not divide. Plurinationality instead acknowledges and celebrates the reality of our countries. It celebrates diversity and the right of each people to live in autonomy. That constitution, with all the imperfections that it may have, set out a historical path In fact, it was an articulation of the indigenous movement, the Afro-descendants, the campesino, the women, the youth, and all social sectors. But above all, it was fruit of the collective fight of that unity in diversity. Now I wonder, probably you wonder too, what happens if we have a constitutional framework? What happens in reality? What is the situation of the territories and the communities? Indeed, 18 years have gone by since the new constitution was built. And we must say that these regulations have helped us enormously to defend our rights, but those regulations per se have not changed the reality of our communities. But for that purpose, our leaders have worked, and we have worked to sustain unity and to keep that organization alive so that collective action will be permanently alert against the threats, the constant threats to our territories. Our contribution to the planet is clear. We plan, manage, and conserve the different ecosystems. However, that contribution is not compensated in equitable terms. According to the data of the state, the indigenous population is 7.7% of the population. Also, the state shows that 38%, according to the data, the official data, the indigenous population represents 7.7% of the Ecuadorian population. While 38% of the indigenous children suffers from malnutrition against 28% nationwide. In 2004, studies stated that 70% of the indigenous Amazonian population lived below the line of poverty, and that poverty is also determined in access to formal education. Most of the youth do not reach universities or college. Most of them don't even finish high school. So, the Amazon region for centuries has been the object of extractivism and ambition. And those threats keep growing, and these erodes the community fabric. And this is by eroding the indigenous peoples. That's why I consider essential that in order to talk about the Amazon region, we must talk with the truth. And talking with the truth about indigenous peoples in the Amazon region demands to recognize that we are not the intact jungle that is pictured from afar. We are diverse peoples, working people with dignity, science, and consciousness. With spirituality, who fight for a fair and just society and reconnected with Mother Nature. Talking about the Amazon region entails to recognize that we are communities affected by extractivism, by crime, racism, and sexism. That we are families that migration push forward the cities seeking labor opportunities and studies. All those are Amazonian realities, and they must be recognized, attended to, and protected. To advocate for the Amazon region means to heal their wounds. What does this mean? To restore the affected ecosystems, to strengthen the community organization. It means to support the communities that are in the place where the state barely reaches and threats are more and more severe. And just like the Amazon region is not just the intact, the jungle picture, we do not fit in the image of the indigenous that many times is seen differently. Being indigenous is not just appearance. It does not reduces to all these feathers that they wear. We are diverse peoples. We are not just a uniform identity. Being an indigenous person means to live respecting our environment and respecting Mother Nature, We carry this in the spirit and by taking care of the environment and awareness. Being indigenous is to put into practice the values that have been taught by our ancestors: honesty, ethics, solidarity, reciprocity, and the commitment of advocating for our territories. Indigenous peoples are very clear with this. If there is no organization, if there is no strength in communities, it is not possible to defend our territories, and it wouldn't be possible to defend and do advocacy outside the country. It wouldn't be possible to defend all the collective rights. This defense has always been carried out with conviction and especially with loyalty. One of our fundamental principles is reciprocity. Just like the land gives us, we take care of it. And now is the time where the world should recognize what's the role played by the indigenous peoples. Now more than ever is an increasing threat and an ambition towards the indigenous communities. We must put into practice the international solidarity, but a solidarity that is real. And yes, we're not talking about charity here. We are talking about solving a historical debt and recognition that indigenous peoples deserve. Against extractivism and the advances of illegal activities and the consuming globalization, resources must reach the communities where they need the most. To those elders who transfer all their knowledge, to the people who were constantly defending life in that space, in that corner, where the state does not reach, and where the actual solidarity doesn't reach. Legal security and ownership is fundamental in our territories. It is crucial for those who are defending those territories, for those who are defending the Amazon region, the Andes, the coast, and all the strategic ecosystems of the planet. If we want to protect the Amazon, it is indispensable to support the women who are cultivating the waters or the chakras, who ensures food sovereignty, those who reforest their daily spaces, those who transfer knowledge to us, those communities, baseline communities that in silence, they do an actual work of protection and conservation of the diverse ecosystems. And it is not only the indigenous peoples, but also the Afro-descendant peoples. These are key peoples for the conservation of all these ecosystems in the Panama zone. The jungle is our mother, and it has taught us the following: life is sustained in diversity, and only by weaving among peoples and generations and territories, we will be able to sustain that balance on Earth. This is the fabric that the peoples invite you all to weave, the fabric of the care of life. Because our life proposal is a transition, an epistemic, ontological, political, and systemical transformation of reconciliation and recognition with humanity itself and our creator mother, which is nature. Finally, I would like to honor the leaders and the former leaders. Some of them are still here, some of them are no longer with us, but who opened the path so that we will be sitting here together by continuing the history of our peoples. But also, I would like to thank and greet to all the cooperating parties that throughout the path of our fights have been present, supporting us step by step. Some are gone, but we remember them. I also want to thank those who have gone through our lives, our colleagues, and our partners of life. In fact, I would like to say that we, the indigenous peoples, the Afro-descendants, and all the peoples, like the YouTube, that tree with very deep roots that are intertwined, we keep resisting, defending, and above all, we're still proposing.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Mónica. Qué
Thank
hermoso.
you so much, Monica.
Sí,
Beautiful.
ahora vamos a tener
Now,
novedades, cosas buenas que vamos
we are going to have some news that we are going to tell, and this has to do with what Monica just spoke about. But before that, I would like to show you a slide. One of our speakers was Cynthia and Sofia and Julia. All three of them have been appointed by our website by the link of TEDxAmazônia. We always need those great nominations. That's why I know, so we're placing here the QR code so that you can nominate or appoint anyone. We are going to consider this in our process. There's always a name that perhaps we can think that can be on the stage, so we can nominate other people that we are going to take into account in our process. Especially because we have already started to prepare next year's event. And today we would like to show you the topic, the date, Designing for Life. Now that life is being threatened across the world, the peoples who are in the Amazon region is great because they know how to take care of this process. This is about creating more life. How do we do that? Right now, that's quite necessary. So that's going to be the topic of next year. We need everyone's help as you have helped us so far. I would like to make that invitation myself. Do you want us back as in Ecuador next year? Well, we have fabulous news that TEDxAmazônia will come back on 2028 with a tourism agency. Can I say something that is not there, but I like to say? Putting together a TEDx is a lot of work, but it is for free. You have to go to TEDx, I don't know whether it is TEDx.com or something like that, but if you want to put together a TEDx in your territory, we can do that. It is not easy, but it's beautiful. Sonia said, oh, I would like to have a TEDx in my territory. Yes, of course it is possible. Whoever wants to do this, it is possible. This is an invitation. I don't know. I am quite lost here. Oh, that's a lot of party. That's way too much party. Yes, we were in a party and then we went to another one. All right, then. Well, I would like to thank the city of Baños and Puyo for welcoming us. That's why we want to come back here. We made so many friends. And there is one person called Juan Pablo. Where is he? Right there. Juan Pablo.
Administrador de cultura, deporte y
He
recreación.
is the administrator of culture, sport, and recreation. He is like my mother because I call Juan Pablo if I need tents, I need water, I need air. He was always there for everything. Juan Pablo, thank you so much, dear. And we're going to take you to Brazil so that you can solve everything up there too, okay? Thank you very much, Juan Pablo.
De nuevo, todos los apoyadores, las personas que hacen ese evento posible son
Thank you
muchos,
for
muchas,
those
muchas,
supporting
muchas. Ya hemos
this
hablado.
event. There are so
Muchas
many
gracias
people
por todo el
supporting this event.
apoyo.
We have
Muchas gracias por
thanked
todos los
them.
socios
We have
aventuras.
talked about this.
Muchas
Thank you for
gracias a
all
los
the
socios de
adventure
conocimiento.
partners. Thank you
Muchas
to all the
gracias a
knowledge
esses socios
partners.
también.
Thank you very
Y
much
los
to those
necesitamos a todos si
partners.
quieren nos
And we
ayudar a
all
hacer el
need each
próximo evento
other.
también.
And
Así
if
que
you
ahora
want to
que
help us
vamos
organize next
a
event,
wrap up,
you're
como se
welcome.
dice,
A cerrar.
a
We are
cerrar
now
este
going to
evento.
wrap up
Ya vamos a empezar
this
la semana
event.
que viene el proceso de
We
curaduría y les vamos
Next
a
year, we
contactar
are
para ver si
going
quieren
to
seguir
start
con nosotros.
the
Los que quieren,
process
ahí vamos a hacer
of
una
nomination.
reunión,
And
para
if you want to be with
November,
us,
para empezar todo.
you want, we are going to have a meeting in October, November to start everything.
Eso es imposible.
Out,
Eso es imposible.
yes, no, we
Pero se
don't
puede
want
tratar.
fines.
Y
Yeah,
entonces
we can
también,
try that.
obviamente, los ponentes les queríamos agradecer nuevamente por
To all
todo lo que han hecho,
speakers,
por
we would
todo el
like to
trabajo.
thank for
Muchos
everything that you
aplausos,
have
por
done,
favor.
all your work. Please a great round of applause to them.
It's
It's been long hours of work and dedication, time, and love.
Y al final
Thank
también
you very
a
much
todo nuestro
to
equipo,
everyone.
en nombre de Bruno
And also
y
to all
Laura,
the team on behalf of
les
Bruno.
felicitamos, les agradecemos porque es un
We
trabajo
congratulate
enorme,
you
tarda
because
muchos
it has
meses,
been
mucho
a
tiempo. Ahora en ese
big
momento hay más de
work
30
that took
personas que están
months.
trabajando en ese evento
Now
con
we have
nosotros,
over
muchos
30
voluntarios
people
también.
working this event
Entonces,
with
el
us
equipo,
and many
muchas
volunteers as
gracias.
well.
Nada
So
sería
thank you very,
posible
very
si
much to the
no
entire team.
fuéramos
This wouldn't be
vosotros.
possible if it wouldn't be for you. Yes, we wouldn't be here
Y a Manuela,
because
y
of
a
you,
Renata,
these
y
wonderful
tanto,
people,
no es posible.
Renata and others.
Alguém me grava aí que eu quero que eles vejam depois, por favor. Eu vou falar em português para agradecer. Posso? Gravar.
I'm going to speak in
Eu
Portuguese.
quero falar em português para agradecer a equipe do Brasil. Teve gente que voou para fora do Brasil pela primeira vez. A gente ficou com medo da imigração, a gente ficou com medo das garrafas que a gente estava trazendo para vocês.
Well, first,
E eu sei que não é fácil.
we're with a little bit with migration issues and all that. I know it is not easy to step out of your cities and to leave a place and go to a place where you don't know the language. So the entire team of Brazil, to the Brazilian delegation, thank you so much for everything. You are wonderful, amazing, amazing, because most of them are women. And I have to talk about the entire team. It's not easy, but we were able to accomplish. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to present our next speaker, member of the Atari community from the province of Pastaza. She was the Quito National Department in Ecuador, was in the indigenous territorial government with Confinaye and Casa is master in the general plan and indigenous planning of the University of Mexico and a bachelor's degree of management of the Universidad of Quito with scholarships. She focuses on the territorial governance.
Alipunja, Paniguna, Waukiguna, Ñucanchi, Gailuguna, Hatun, Wasichik, Amazonía. Buenos días, hermanas, hermanos, familia de la gran casa común, la Amazonía.
En mi lengua,
cuando nos encontramos con alguien,
in my language and Ramashina, when we meet someone, when we are seeing someone, we say, Causa Nguchu. You live? And that question can be obvious, but to us, that's never obvious because living is not just breathing. Living is being good, in balance, full with everything that surrounds you. I come from an indigenous community in the Quito of Pastaza. The fundamental principle is the summa causa, the right living, and the summa cacha, the living jungle. To us, jungle is not a resource, it is a being, a living being. It lives, breathes, and takes care of it. And today I'm going to tell you what happens with those principles about living in balance. It's say millions of dollars to allegedly take care of the jungle. But I want to ask you, do you live? How do you live? Why that question? How do you live? That's someone that has never been asked, especially to the communities that have been living for centuries, taking care of the forest. But when the money comes, someone has to decide how to use it, and that can change everything. Back in December 2024, Ecuador negotiated a debt swap for nature, $460 million for 17 years in a trust fund, a legal and financial mechanism that will guarantee for the money to be used for the commitment. This is not a donation, it is not a favor. It is a financial sovereign negotiation where Ecuador saved, and those 460 millions were intended to protect the Amazon region. That's how the Amazonia Corridor Fund started. I'll be honest, there are some legitimate voices that question that debt swap is still debt, and the global south is responsible of climate collapse, who is our territory that's guaranteed. That criticism is valid and I share it. But I'm not here to defend that mechanism. I'm thinking about the rivers, the forests, and the communities, and who's going to decide how to use that money. But this is not the first experience that Ecuador has. Galapagos has a fund of conservation for several years already operating, and there's a lot to learn from it. When that fund was designed, the local communities were not part of the decision making. They are not in the board of directors, they are not in the strategy and where projects are approved. As a result of this, a fund with resources but with governance problems, legitimacy problems, and trust issues, a fund with resources but without roots on site. And that was the first lesson learned when designing the Biocorridor Fund. But there is a closer lesson and more painful too. In Ecuador, there is a fund that feeds from the royalties of mining and oil. It's been 6 years working without indigenous peoples to access to it directly. 6 years. Why? Bureaucracy, impossible requirements, long forms that you have to hire someone to fill them in. Administrators who have changed, the regulations changed, and so forth and so on. The indigenous leaders put it this way: it is much easier to solve a tax problem than accessing a fund that was allegedly created for us. And that explains everything, because that fund was designed for the indigenous people, not with them, without the actual advocacy of how the resource is used, with no direct investment line, without life plans, our life plans to be implemented. And the difference between for and with is not just semantics, it is the difference of 6 years of waiting or never. So when we talk about the indigenous engagement in the climate financing, we usually talk about consultation or process of socialization and meetings. But consultation is not enough. Consultation puts you in the waiting room. governance places you on the table. The Biocorridor Fund is comprised of 9 members, and 6 of them are independent from the state. They do not account for any political party policy, but human and technical that recognizes the collective rights. Company, the organization that represents the indigenous organizations in the Ecuadorian Amazonian, was not only consulted, it was part of the co-design. Their needs are already written as commitments that Ecuador must comply with. Because conservation cannot come from outside, conservation must be built up from the inside out, from the bottom, from those who know the river, the names of wild tree flourishes under what moon, those who understand that the Amazon region is not an asset, it is a living being that we coexist with. And I am a member of that board of directors. I participated in a call for proposals and I won, and I accepted it without any wage or benefits because I am convinced of the importance of being part of the governance of that mechanism. And when I sit down in the decision-making table, I'm not alone. I always bring with me centuries of territorial knowledge, and I bring the urgency of the communities that need solutions now. I also bring the responsibility of not betraying that trust. Being on the same table or working group at the same level with other authorities and members is not a legitimate system, but to influence it, to place our passion and history where it matters most, the decisions. And from that table, the biocorridor meaning I dream. When I dream, I don't see documents. I see solutions, technology that emerges from the territory for the territory because integrating indigenous peoples in the governance part is not enough if the financial mechanisms are inaccessible and science comes from outside. For governance to be real, I have 2 concrete dreams. The first one is a window of direct access and not 1,000 pages of forms, but something built with the community so that projects come from the territory are not lost in bureaucracy. I just imagine these solar panels assembled locally in the communities, the electric engines navigating on the rivers, biomonitoring systems built and designed by the community guards themselves of the indigenous peoples. This request of the direct access and financing, we keep doing this in each international forum and COP because less than 1% of the climate financing reaches the indigenous peoples directly. The rest is lost in intermediaries and consulting activities.
Instructors that do not know the rivers or forests. My second dream is an Amazonian biolab, not for scientists to come study the jungle and take data, but for the communities to experiment, innovate, and decide what is to be researched and what for. This way, we will be building from inside what has been imposed on us from outside. Indigenous peoples are doing our part. We're taking care of the forest. We put our bodies and lives to defend our territories. And science has given us the reason because it is thanks to this philosophy, living philosophy of indigenous peoples that the Amazon has remained very intact. And I add Afro descendant in the Amazon as well. It's thanks to our life philosophy that the Amazon has almost not been touched. So we need the society, donors, international cooperation to find us midway, mainly that the states comply with the commitments of reducing carbon emissions so that we can start building climate justice with everyone who is part of the Amazon, not only conservation policies. So this isn't a favor. We are not asking favors. We are demanding a fundamental value, which is reciprocity. The Amazon is the most biodiverse area in the planet. It is the fundamental regulator of the weather, is a source of water, of knowledge, of identity, and for many centuries, it's being subject of decisions made by other people in other places, by people who have never heard the river sound in the morning and they didn't know where the shower was. All of the funds and financial mechanisms need to learn from their mistakes and adapt, because the Amazonian communities are not passive beneficiaries of conservation. They are their architects. And from here, from the Amazon, we can tell the world that this is possible. It is possible to have just conservation, that the future of the planet will not be saved from ministries, offices, nor from New York investment funds. It will be saved from here, from the Amazon, from the territories, from the tables where the people who know the forest sit. At the beginning, I asked you, Kausangi Chichu? Today I tell you, Amazonia Kausami. The Amazon lives. Nutkanji Kausauchimi. Its people, the indigenous people, live, and we are here not to be conserved or to be guardians, but to lead, to show the world that another path exists, a path that comes from Samakausai, good living that comes from Kausak Sacha, the living forest, and that a different future is possible, and it begins here. Thank you very much. Pagaracho.
Gracias, Diana, qué fuerte. Hay muchas verdades en lo que dice. Gracias.
Thank you, Diana.
Y ahora vamos para
Those were a lot of truths spoken, so thank you. And now we are headed to our last conference, but it's not the last thing we have here at the stage. There is a surprise at the end. But right now, I would like to call this traditional healer and political and spiritual leader of the Zapara Nation in the Ecuadorian Amazon. He served as president of the Zapara Federation and vice president of CONAIE. He helped conserve more than 276,000 hectares of primary forest and co-founded the NACU Center, a community tourism model recognized by UNESCO. So, with a great honor, I call to the stage Manari.
Hermanas, hermanos, amigas, amigos.
Sisters, brothers, friends. We are a family. We are a family that is thinking about coming into the spirit of TEDxAmazônia. The civilized human world took a path towards failure. And that failure is what we are reflecting upon to find the solution. The solution will be found in this word written here, Amazonia. So, we come to the time of the past. So we are going to find our jungle. There, we are going to dream for an answer. I have heard that there is a lot of concern when talking about global warming. We still don't know what this is, but we do understand what it is. The earth grows, the tree grows, human grows, rocks grow, animals grow, and so the earth keeps growing. And what does it need to grow? It needs warmth. It needs the sun. The sun is coming right into the center of the earth. It's warming the earth up, and that way earth will grow. So this is what everyone's talking about, global warming. So if we know this, now us as humans, and I am not talking about the indigenous peoples, I am talking about human beings inhabiting Earth, this Earth, our huge planet Earth. We need to start breathing and feeling as being part of this growth. And that's when we are going to start dreaming the dream for the indigenous world. Dreaming is very important because in dreams we understand how the energy in the spiritual world gets concentrated to give new life. So, in the material plane, we need to open our awareness of changing the words that we have given the world. Words such as conservation, economy, the word that breathes earth, problems. All of these words need to be changed now because we need to understand these words well. You know that words are energy, they are spirits, they are souls. These words are killing us. They are killing the history of humanity. So let's change them. Let's change these words to encourage Earth, to encourage our story. And as our partners before me were saying, summa causa, harmony, love. And with this, we are going to change our lives' energy to continue existing. And many people think that spirituality comes from the church. That's wrong. Spirituality comes from the Amazon, from the jungle, from the earth. So, this spirituality is what we are going to change. We are going to redirect it so that we can continue existing in this world because the world is our huge dwelling. The world is our life. I have been seeing all of the presentations we had. There were territorial boundaries, but that's non-existent. Those boundaries are in our heads. The problems are in our head, within our heads. I do not see a problem flying around looking for someone to solve it. I'm not seeing that in the world. What I see is life. What I see is air. What I see is trees. That is what I see. And so, what I would like now is, when I heard TEDxAmazônia, I started dreaming. And in my dream, right in the center of the Amazon, 6 spirits came to me. These spirits were walking towards this conference. And there I found the organizers who were sitting here with us. So when we got here, in my dream, they gave us a book, which was called the Book of Life. But when they gave us this book, there was nothing there. We were looking around, going through the pages, and there was nothing there. And one of the organizers said, "You need to read this book, thinking of life." So when we think that way, we started reading that book and we found the message there. The message said that from the center of the universe, there is a connection with the center of Earth. And that's what harmonizes our life. And that's the rebirth. And that's where the new breath of life was born. So by seeing this, I felt that a new story for human beings was just beginning. And that's why I thank these people who organized this, who called us, so that we can talk about these wise, powerful words, strong, firm words that tell us where we want to go, what path we need to follow. The human world, we are not good looking at paths ahead, but we're good making plans and looking for a future, but we are not good at building paths, a true path where we come together as humans. To finish, I want to tell you that one day, my father, who is no longer living, he is now in the spiritual world, and he told me, this jungle is full of energy of abundance, and you cannot lose this, because this abundance is the life and the new light that gives us life to continue existing here on earth. And for the children coming, for the babies that are being born right now, we need to leave that light on, shining in the heart of TEDxAmazônia. Thank you.
Se acabó.
Over.
No, no se acabó todavía.
No, it's not over yet.
Tuve un sueño.
I had a
En el
dream.
sueño estaban
And in my dream,
muchas mujeres reunidas
there were many
para
women gathered
juntas, muchas mujeres que hasta TEDxAmazônia no se conocían
many women that had not
y
met
las
each other
invitaba y
before
estábamos
TEDx
allí en un círculo
Amazonia, and I invited them, and we were there
y las invitaba
in a
a
circle,
juntas crear
and
el
I
mensaje
invited
final
them
de TEDxAmazônia.
to put
No es
the
una
final
charla,
message of
no las sabían
TEDxAmazônia
antes
together.
de llegar aquí,
This isn't a talk you didn't know, and they didn't know
pero
about it
logramos.
before coming
Logramos
here,
todo, ¿no?
but we were able to
Entonces,
make it. We actually made everything
¿estamos listas? ¿Quién
possible.
me da un sí?
So, are we ready?
Marcela, ¿sí
Who gives
estamos?
me a yes? Yes, Marcela, are we ready?
Gracias a las guardianas.
Okay, I would like to thank the guardians.
Miyana wanchiruna, yarum yarum minya hai, yarum yarum minya hai, yarum yarum
The
minya
manifest of the
hai.
guardians.
Apacho, apacho, minya uchichiruna, yarum yarum minya hai, yarum yarum minya hai. Apacho, 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 apacho. Aquí traje a todas mis nietas
I brought all of my granddaughters here.
de diferentes nacionalidades.
My granddaughters from different
En esta
nationalities.
cascada para darles
In
tabaco
this, I brought them to this waterfall to give them tobacco so that the route,
para que
the
defiendan
path
sus
of the waterfall gives them power for them to defend their territories. Amen.
Soy María, somos Quichua del
I
Ecuatoriano
am
Amazonía y
Maria.
aquí del Ecuador.
We are Quechua from the Ecuadorian Amazon.
Napoya kurair kushkai, anyango pipaktamuni. Napoya kurair kushkai, yasuni pipaktamuni. Yasuni pipaktamusha, sumakta mi causa hunchi. Yasuni pipaktamusha, yaktachi shami causanchi. Karikuna warmikuna, wawakuna di causanchi. Karikuna warmikuna, wawakuna di causanchi. Anyango yakura sikashkai, atun kuchama paktani. Anyango yakura sikashkai, atun kuchama paktani. Atun kuchama paktapi, paichiguna kushparino. Atun kuchama paktapi, lagarto latuparino. Sachaguna kuiranchimi, wiwakuna kuiranchimi. Yakuguna kuiranchimi, sachaguna kuiranchimi. La fuerza de la tierra está en nosotros.
The strength of the earth is in us. I am from Monte, Guarani woman.
Merina ni ke gai mai me merina ni ke gai mai me nyerina ni ke gai mai me hey 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 nyerina ni ke gai mai me merina ni ke gai mai me hey 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 Mujeres en resistencia en defensa de nuestro cuerpo.
Women resisting, defending our bodies and our territories. I come from the great Sapar nation, the people of dreams. I am going to sing a song written by the children of my territory. And it says,
Kasumaha ratonuka witsa witsa kumakeka kaitakahinya risunuka kumanta aramuku kasamaha ratonuka witsa witsa kumakeka puyunita pakaiteka puyunita ushichaha tsukuya hunukui kasumaha ratonuka witsa witsa kumakeka.
this song says, if you take my river away from me, where will I bathe? If you take my trees away from me, where am I going to play? If you take my jungle from me, who am I going to talk to? Our bodies, our territories cannot be touched, cannot be violated, and cannot be killed. Lucia Ichu, Maya Kiche, from the jungles of
Sakarik Wachalal, Sakarik, Sakarik, Sakarik Kamalbe, Sakarik, Sakarik, Sakarik Wachalal, Sakarik, Sakarik, Sakarik Kamalbe, Ishbekich, Ishbekich, Ishbekich Wonochel, Ishbekich, Ishbekich, Ishbekich Kamalbe, Ishbekich, Ishbekich, Ishbekich Kamalbe, Ishbekich, Ishbekich, Ishbekich Wonochel. La fuerza de la tierra está en nosotras.
The strength of the earth lies within us, indigenous Afro-descendant women.
La Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta y la Amazonía son el corazón de
The highlands of Santa Marta and the Amazon are the hearts of the world. I am Guna Chaparra from Santa Marta's Sierra Nevada, and the message is, as women, we are protectors, caregivers, guardians. We are the future. We have to read this. The strength of earth is within us. Women in resistance, defending our bodies and our territories. Our bodies and territories are not to be touched, violated, or killed. The strength is within earth and within us, indigenous women.
Apachro, apachro, viña hey, viña hey, viña nawan shiruna, yarum viña hey, yarum viña hey, yarum viña hey, apachro, apachro, viña hey, viña hey.
Adiós. Muchas gracias.
Goodbye. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Duna kakaran, chora, nari, andukati, tika 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 tika, shir manu, chua 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 chua.
Recording stopped.